the teachings of Christ, I can't find any faults in it. Like, it's all about being kind. It's all about this idea that we're all in this together and that you're supposed to lift each other up and look after each other. There's no faults in it. It's not like you have to kill the non-believers. It's not like you get to rape and pillage for the non-believers and the infidels must die. There's none of that.
That's why Christians believe in objective truth, that there must be objective truth, because otherwise why is most of the world following this as though it's objective truth? We seem to be leaning towards this as though this must be the thing which is objectively real and objectively true, and a thing which we can point to that is, because when people are introduced to it, like you just said, it's really hard and difficult to find fault in it. It's not just that. It's interesting. If we reverse it, if we say, what could I do that actually would be the best for me, it would still be that.
Yeah.
Which is the funniest part of the whole thing. It's like, both ways it works for you, even if it's not all about you, or it works for you even if it is all about you. It's still going to be the better message out of the two.
It's definitely a better framework for living your life. And there's a lot of people that just reject that think of themselves as intelligent. They think of themselves as intelligent and well-read and educated.
I'm
and
too
they just
smart
think
for that.
Yeah, I'm too smart for that.
I'm too smart for all that.
I'm an atheist.
Yeah.
Any atheist needs to take 8 grams of mushrooms. Just
do a little DMT?
do a little DMT. And you're like, oh, I don't know anything. You think you know things. You don't know a fucking thing. You just know what you've experienced. And I think that the world is better off if people have a great moral and ethical framework. I think morals and ethics and being kind is one of the most important values that human beings can ever possess if you want to live in a productive and healthy community.
Completely agree. And I think that kindness, I make a delineation between kindness and niceness, because I think it's often kind not to be nice.
Right.
But I do think that you can be nice and it may not be kind.
Right.
And so
that's true.
So I make a delineation between those things. I don't think that kindness, though, has much variance. Kindness is looking after the interest of somebody who's not me.
And it makes everybody, it's actually selfish because it makes you feel good too.
Yeah, there is something.
You can look at it that way.
Sure. From the position of trying to convince the unbeliever, right? Appealing to their self-interest may not be the worst idea.
Right.
Appealing to has the lack of community and let's just assume for a second. Let's just assume it's all bullshit and it's all nonsense. Every bit of it is just totally made up. We just made it up, right? But we all acted as though it was true. If it's the case that your whole framework is that we just want a society that really works well and does the best it can possibly do for everyone, then shouldn't you, by your own framework, just pretend it's true?
Right. Yeah.
Shouldn't you just act as though it's true anyway?
Jordan Peterson had a very good point about that.
Yeah.
About believing in God, that if you act as if God is real, you will have a better life. Like it works. It really does work.
Almost like a universal truth.
Yeah. It's very fascinating. It's fascinating that people that are self-professed atheists and people that think of themselves as too intelligent for religion won't acknowledge that. They don't want to believe that. And so many of them that I know that are self-professed atheists are some of the most miserable people. They're very depressed. A lot of them are on psychiatric medications. A lot of them are in therapy. A lot of them are really fucked up.
They're almost cursed. Almost seems like that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the thing that's interesting is I've talked with a lot of atheists, debated with a lot of atheists, especially on the effects of Christianity in society against the effects of atheism.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, I don't know how to fuck his last name up.
Nurmagomedov, yeah.
Khabib Nurmagomedov is arguably the greatest fighter of all time. He's definitely in the argument. I mean, the guy lost 2 rounds ever in his whole career. He is devoutly religious. I mean, 5 times a day there's a call to prayer. They don't fuck around.
Yeah.
During Ramadan, there's no eating, no drinking, no nothing during the day. The training is all brutal and Spartan.
Yeah.
And
he takes no credit. What does he do all the time? He goes,
and he's
this?
super
No,
humble.
that.
Yes, always. He's super humble, and he's admirable. right? Like you see a man like that, that's a man of character.
Yes.
That's a man of distinction.
Yes.
That's a champion.
Yes, I'd rather fight an atheist than a man coming to me singing the fucking Psalms.
Yeah.
Right? You remember when Evander Holyfield was singing the Psalms when he stepped in with the
Tyson.
unbeatable Mike Tyson?
Yeah.
Well, you know, he had the Holy Ghost, the Father, and the Son, and himself. That's 4 people that Tyson was fighting that day.
And just pure belief in himself.
Yes.
Yeah.
But more in belief in something higher than
God.
himself.
Yeah.
That's what I think that we are in deep trouble if we don't have a transcendent truth we believe in. I find it very, very intriguing and interesting that let's take Jesus Christ and Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar, the most powerful man in the world at the time, and let's just take any sort of reincarnation of that guy, you know, just Jeff Bezos or whoever it might be. You've got the world at your fingertips. Even someone like Joe Rogan, everybody loves you. Everything is free. It is what it is. You've reached the top of the mountain, and so let's take Julius Caesar. All the power in the world, commanded armies, ran everything, and anyone would be seduced by that prospect. It'd be pretty cool to be at the top of the mountain. Yet somehow there's a guy who was a radical rabbi, which just really means teacher, a first century Jew who at the prime of his life is killed, tortured, put up on a cross, and despite him being quote unquote God or very close to divinely inspired, he gets tortured and put on a cross. So there's you die with nothing. And oh, by the way, couple of crazy notions: love your enemy, walk as a humble person, sell all your possessions, give the money to the poor, all these things. And you in your body, there's something higher. So your appetites, this physical frame should be subservient to a higher ideal. And I'm going to prove it by being on a cross. And what's the last thing I'm going to say? Something to the effect of, I love you and I forgive you. Not a great way, not a good ending, by the way. Not a way if you want to get successful, but yet we revere that person. Somehow, all of us, atheists, Christians, whoever it is, somehow nostalgically or in our imagination know that the way he walked that path, even if it ends in total ruin, that path somehow has more power. Somehow it lasts longer. Somehow it has more meaning. Even if we try to emulate it to a lesser degree, somehow it makes us feel, somehow there seems to be something, it seems to dovetail with the laws of the universe. It seems to dovetail with something we would call the truth, something we'd call beauty, something we'd call inspiration. That's what I'm interested in. We don't talk about Julius Caesar or anybody who accomplishes crazy things the way we talk about people like Mohandas K. Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, people that were emulating this idea, the idea of passive resistance, the idea of turning the other cheek, and then a guy like Christ, the Buddha. I find that interesting. I find it very interesting that human beings seem to resonate when they think of it. I always say my best version of myself is clearing his throat in the other room. You know, you and I call it the pesky truth. Like I gotta get this shit done over here. I know the right way. I know what I should be doing. I know the way I should be behaving. And I find it very interesting that if you were to just accept that the laws that are laid down in this scripture, let's say the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Quran, the Abrahamic religions, I'm just going to talk about that for a second. There's a lot of self-restriction in that.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of prudence in that. There's a lot of, it ain't that much fun. You can't be promiscuous.
Look at a guy like Khabib.
What can this possibly mean? Well, I was thinking about that in relationship to imagery of the crucifix and the story that surrounds it. So Jung thought that the Passion story was archetypal because it's a limit story. Like this debate at Oxford. You cannot write a more tragic story. It's impossible, technically. Why? Well, because it's a story of the aggregation of everything that people are afraid of. So there was no death more painful than crucifixion. That's why the Romans invented it. It was to punish political miscreants. It was the slow, agonizing death by suffocation, essentially, and dehydration and exposure. It's extraordinarily painful. Okay, so that sucks. That's pain, man. Plus, you know it's coming. That's part of the story. Plus, your best friend betrayed you into it. Plus, your people turned against you. Plus, they're led by a tyrant who doubts truth. Plus, you're a victim of the Roman Empire. Plus, you're completely innocent. Plus, everybody knows it. Plus, they choose a criminal to be released from this experience instead of you, even though they know he's a criminal and they know you're innocent. So, and you're young. And you've done no wrong, and all you've done is help people. So it's a limit story. Okay, so then you think, we've been looking at that limit story for 2,000 years in the image and in the story. What are we doing? Well, you're supposed to visit the stations of the cross, let's say. Okay, here's the idea. You hear the crucifixion story, and you play with it. Who are you? Maybe if you're female, you're Mary, and why is that? It's the Pieta. Because you have to offer your children to the destruction of the world. That's female courage. That's the mother that doesn't hold her child back. It's like, go out. To what? Eventually your death and destruction. Go out. Leave me. Be in the world. That's feminine courage, man, to let her baby go. You're Pilate. You doubt truth. But you'll go along with the crowd. You're Judas because you betray your best friend. You're the mob. You're the criminal. All of that, that's you. You look on all those things that you hate and are terrified by. That's not a snake. It's like the worst of all possible snakes everywhere. That's what you're looking at. And what do you see? You see death, you see destruction, pain, terror, tyranny, frailty, betrayal. Look harder. Look harder. Look harder. What do you see? The death and resurrection. You look far enough into the abyss, you see the light. Well, that's the story. That's the connection between those stories. And this unbelievably strange thing is that connection exists. It's like there's the strange story of the serpent in the desert, and we know that story is 3,000 years old, something like that. We know that. And then we know perfectly well that Christ said that he was allied, that his image was allied with that snake. That's written down. And even if you don't believe in the historical reality of Christ, someone still made that connection. And did they know?
I really like the way that Jordan Peterson articulates it, but I think he misses the forest for the trees.
How so?
In that he sees Jesus as an archetype. And I don't think actually even Jesus gives you the opportunity to see him as the archetype. Because I have this love-hate relationship with all of Peterson's stuff, because he seems to get so much right where he walks up to the line, but he doesn't want to cross over.
And is the crossover, you think, connected to a life in academia? Or
No.
What do you think it is?
I wonder, and I'd love to talk to him about this, like how do you remedy this issue that, because he seems to think that the concept of Jesus as an example is more important than the actual flesh and blood first century itinerant Jewish preacher who was crucified and rose from the dead physically, which is the claim of the Gospels and the rest of the New Testament. That's an example for us to look on and live by. But I actually think that Jesus condemns moralism. And ultimately what I see Peterson doing is looking at Jesus as a moral example. And if Jesus is nothing but a moral example, then you can save yourself and you don't actually need a savior. And so I think actually Jesus would have critiqued that, because Jesus was very against moralism.
And how do you define Jesus being against moralism? Like, what do you mean by that exactly?
Well, Jesus looks at the religiosity of his day with like particular groups like the Pharisees and the Sadducees, who are these other groups of Jews during his day. So we talked about the Essenes, who actually aren't mentioned in the Bible, but there are other groups like the Pharisees, who are like lay scholars, and the Sadducees, who are professional priest scholars. And he's constantly critiquing the fact that they have this hypocritical religiosity to them, where they're doing things like tithing their mint leaves, like to make sure that they get all of. This is where we get the idea of the letter of the law versus the intention of the law. Like Jesus critiques them for that because he says, you're trying to do everything right and you're missing the point. So one of the things he says is like, if your donkey falls in a ravine on the Sabbath, do you pull it out? Or is that work? Like, what's the point of the Sabbath? Is it to not do any work? Like, is it to make sure that you're not working too hard because you might be breaking the Sabbath? Or like, what is the point? He says, like, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And that there's this intention. This is the whole Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5, is he keeps saying, you have heard it said, but I say, and he refers to the Mosaic Law. And it looks like he's critiquing the Mosaic Law, but he's not actually. He's getting back to the intention of the law. So when he says, you have heard it said, do not commit murder, but I say to you, anybody who harbors a hate for their brother in their heart has already committed murder. And what he's getting to is like, what's the intention? What's the meaning of the law that God gives to you? Because the law is like a mirror. It shows you how dirty you are. But his critique is he's like, you guys are trying to clean yourself with a mirror. That's stupid. It's just going to, if anything, it's going to make you more messy. Like, get in the shower. The law is not what cleans you. The law is what reveals that you're dirty. And so in that sense, I think, if Jesus is a moral example, it actually misses what I think Jesus actually said about what his purpose was, in that you can't do enough to actually live up to the standard that God holds you to. And so if you keep striving, you're actually going to wear yourself out and be exhausted.
Like atheists.
I didn't say you did, Joe.
A lot of them go crazy. They go crazy.
I was very interested by this because I've looked at every conspiracy theory, moon landing, 9/11, JFK, I mean, all kinds of conspiracies. The one I had never looked at, and now, I'm 58, so I'm like, okay, let me look at this one, is God. And I said, let me see about this God thing. I've never been a religious guy. And so I start reading and I start talking to people. I also found that around me, like a couple of people I was working with, they're all Christians. And not that anyone was ever pushing anything on me. When I asked them questions, they were gladly answered. And there's a lot of stuff written about Jesus. There's a lot written, thousands of years of books. And there's some contemporary stuff such as Evidence Demands a Verdict. And, this just is so much. And I got to tell you, Joe, as sure as I know that Building 7 didn't fall down out of sympathy for Building 1 and 2, God is real, Jesus existed, he was a badass outlaw, and it has changed my outlook on life. It has really changed the way I look at things. And I believe that we can win with God. I know that may sound a little weird coming from me, but I'm all in on this. And, I'm not you may think of someone who believes in God or Jesus as a crazy right-wing nut job, which I'm obviously not. But man, it's powerful stuff when you put prayer into your life. It's really powerful. The Holy Spirit.
I don't think there's anything weird about it at all. I mean, I think there's a reason why it exists, why it's so prevalent in so many cultures. It helps people.
It's about love.
Yeah,
it's all about love.
Yeah. What do you think Jesus' role was? Who do you think he was?
Well, he was literally the Son of God, and he was on the earth to teach, and he wandered. I mean, he was an outlaw. He did some crazy shit. He overturned the tax tables, and he really railed against a lot of stuff.
Why do you think, based on what information that you have, why do you think that he existed?
Jesus had to die after teaching us how to live a good life and how to be a good person, which is all about love. And that was to absolve us of our sins, which is kind of a cool out. So everyone's a sinner, everyone's fucked up, everyone's flawed, but you are forgiven for that as long as you try to be better. I mean, that's literally every book in the Bible is about. Like I was reading this morning, I forget what it was, but it's like Jesus said, be quick to listen, slow to answer, and slow to get angry. And I took that here, because I remember last time I was here, which was over a year ago, and a lot of people said, dude, you're a fucking asshole. You keep interrupting Joe. And I did. And you even said, calm down, Adam, calm down. You're excited to talk.
But that's just normal excitedness. You're not being an asshole.
But it's better if I listen. it makes everything better. So it's just small things like that. But ultimately, it's 100% about love, and knowing that it can be beaten. This evil in the world can be fought against. In fact, it's probably already done. And I'm just new to this, Joe, so I can't answer everything. But I love studying it. I love reading. It's fascinating material, and
It
there's
is fascinating
so much
material.
there. It's really fascinating.
A person being the actual Son of God, I would need a lot of evidence to believe that.
Evidence Demands a Verdict would be a great book to
Yeah.
read. But just as I know that JFK was assassinated, and I really believe the CIA was involved because it's been written. I've just read documents and documents. So when you look into the Bible and everything that's been written about the Bible, that's 100 million times more has been written about that, and it's survived all these years. So I'm
but
just
if
someone
someone
who reads.
writes about The Shining,
Yeah.
and a bunch of people review the writing of The Shining and write about The Shining, it doesn't mean that The Shining actually happened. You know, just because so many people are writing about this particular religion doesn't mean that there was a person.
But they haven't written about
doesn't mean they weren't. I'm not saying they weren't. I'm not saying I know.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm saying it doesn't mean that man was the Son of God.
I'm just telling you, my process is when I investigate things, and to me it was a conspiracy theory. Like, I'm just going to start reading, and I read for 3 weeks until I gave up and said, I can keep reading, but all the evidence just is thrown at me over and over and over again. If I'm going to believe certain things about JFK or 9/11 or whatever, which I've read as much as I can, but there's not that much. It's just for my own conscience. I have to, if I'm going to believe that after reading 50 years of documentation versus that thousands of years of documentation.
But it's thousands of years of documentation of a story. It's interesting that some people would rather not get there and rather be in a shitty, depressed state as long as they're not duped. but you've been duped by life. Like,
of course.
Because your life sucks.
But,
I mean, there's
but
I know
it's
a lot
not
of
like
atheists
but
that are
the idea,
super depressed.
The idea is not that God fixes everything. The idea is if you can believe in it and can put yourself in a mindset, I'm just looking at a little abstract now.
Yes.
You put yourself in a mindset that things can happen, that miracles do happen, that things do impact your life, and that you look at things in a different way. You're not always completely fucked up about this is not happening for me or that's not happening.
Do you think it's like psychological software that you can run? Like your belief in God. Do you think that's like psychological software that you could just run and they're like, ooh, look, everything's smoother?
No, it's not. No, because everything isn't smoother, but you at least don't freak out when shit isn't smooth.
Right. I don't mean it in a derogatory way or a negative way.
I know.
What I mean is like, is that why it's effective? That
Well,
it's like a natural thing that you could run and it's been honed over time. It only makes sense that it
Well,
has
yes.
been,
Well, here you go.
right?
I love this.
So it just sort of slides.
What is the software?
into-
What is the code? It's the Bible. It is the gospel, Scripture. That is, if you want to look at it that way, it is the code that you run in your brain, and it does things for you.
Yeah.
So that's a way of looking at it. And that's a kind of a good way, actually. I hadn't thought of that one. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Like a psychological software.
Sure.
But the problem is, if he was really good at it and really successful in a time when people were not very sophisticated, he could probably pull it off. And then when he dies, everybody would say he was the Son of God.
Sure.
And we don't know.
No.
So how would you know that this guy who lived 2,000 plus years ago
That's why.
is actually the Son of
That's
God?
why I call myself a believer.
Because you just believe.
Yeah.
Well,
and I've seen what it has done for my own life.
what does it do for your own life when you believe?
It makes me a very happy person. Prayer does work, not if you're asking for stuff for yourself, but I've experienced, it's not really just the miracles that I've experienced, but it really makes me happy. Good things have been happening.
So you just find it effective. It works for you.
Of course.
And
yeah.
so you're just saying
Yeah.
this has helped your life. How can you possibly
you can
prove...
never get to the end, of course not.
Right.
But
you can never prove. You could prove that people believed it.
Yeah,
But how could you
you're
prove
correct.
that someone was actually the Son of God?
No,
Or are we all?
of course we're
So
all
then,
God.
of course he
We're
was.
100% God.
So if he was
He was-
one of
but
us,
he was the teacher,
then he
though.
was the Son of God because we're all children of
I'm
God.
with that. I'm with
right?
that, yeah.
Maybe that's the answer. Maybe it's a puzzle.
It-
Jesus.
That's right. Help me, Jesus. Help me, Jesus.
Help me, Jesus. That's very admirable, but I think for some people it represents bonding of the community. And
Well, you could have concerts and lectures and book clubs.
But I think when they get together and they talk about all the values that Jesus proposed, if Jesus is the higher power, it gives them this sort of, again, moral scaffolding to live their life.
Yes. Well, Jesus would probably on the whole provide a fairly good moral scaffolding. Not totally, but
right.
He was ahead of his time anyway.
So you do think he was a real person?
Most of the scholars I've talked to say he probably was. The evidence is not great, of course, but I think I don't think it's that big a deal actually, because a wandering preacher called Yeshua or Yehoshua would not be surprising. I mean, it's a common name,
right.
And there are plenty of wandering preachers. What would be very surprising would be if he raised Lazarus from the dead and walked on water and turned water into wine. And that, of course, did not happen.
Well, why couldn't people just drink water either? Why did they have to drink wine? He's trying to get people drunk? Like, what's that all about?
That's a separate question. But I think the point I'm making is that it's a very big difference to say, did he exist? And maybe he did, maybe he didn't. Who cares, really? Or that's very different from saying that a miracle worker who really did do miracles rather than conjuring tricks existed.
Yes. What was you said that you wrote this, it's a beginner's guide, Outgrowing God.
Well, it's for young people. I originally wanted to write a book for young children, and publishers didn't want to do that. So they kept pushing the age range up, and so it stabilized at about 15. But I think 14, the first chapter has been read by one 10-year-old to my acquaintance. He loved it. And I think, but really I'm hoping it'll be read by people of all ages.
There's one thing that does happen to some people that are indoctrinated very young, that the experience is so negative to them that they rebel. And then they seek out other ways of thinking, and then you find them eventually abandoning the religion. There's a woman named Megan Phelps. Do you know who she is?
I think I do.
She's Fred Phelps from the Westboro Baptist Church. She was his granddaughter, and amazing woman.
Yes.
And she wound up communicating with people through all things Twitter.
Yes.
And met her husband.
So she rebelled against her father. Yes. Her grandfather.
Yeah, she wound up leaving the church. And wound up realizing that she was trapped in some sort of a Christian cult, and a very hateful one.
Yes.
They're the God hates fags people.
Exactly,
right?
I know. And the same was true of Nate Phelps, who was Fred Phelps' son. And he also escaped. He escaped on his 18th birthday.
Wow.
And became an atheist, and became, I think he's actually spoken at some of our conferences from time to time. So,
yeah, there's hope in that.
Yes,
right?
there is.
It's just when I like when people can, and I've had her on the podcast. She's such a unique woman, and she's so kind, and she's so thoughtful and intelligent. It's hard to believe that she's only been out of this cult for a few years. I mean, Twitter's only been around for
why wasn't she
14
ruined by it, you're saying?
Right,
yes.
Why wasn't she ruined by it? And why she is so intelligent? How did she exist in that structure while being so intelligent?
I agree. But of course, I feel the same way about apparently intelligent people who believe obvious nonsense.
Yeah.
And it's hard to understand.
That we are we're the product of an intentional act, and we were imbued with a force that was greater even than those who created us. And there has been an effort from that time to deny us that force.
Well, how do you know that our force is greater than those that created us?
I don't know this.
Where are you getting that from?
That is from, if you're familiar with the Gnostic texts. In the Gnostic texts, the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in 1946-47, the oldest unedited records of the Old Testament. Push the date back 1,000 years. In 45 and 46, the oldest records of the New Testament and the texts that were excluded were discovered in a little village along the Nile in Egypt called Nag Hammadi. Can I just tell? It's a crazy story.
Sure.
There's not much firewood. along the Nile in Egypt, and there was a woman who needed kindling to feed her family, to build the fires, to feed her family and heat their home. And she told her son, go find some kindling, and he was very resourceful. There's no trees, so he found an old tomb. And in the tomb were clay vases, and he opened those vases, and there were documents that were very dry and brittle and made great kindling.
Oh, no.
And we don't know how many were lost before the authorities were noted, but right now there are 13 bound.
They cooked a bunch of them?
They burned, they used them for fuel.
Oh, my God.
Here's what's left. What's left, there were 13 bound books representing over 50 texts. They were the oldest records of the New Testament, and they were the records that were excluded by the Catholic Church.
Is there any images of these books?
Yeah.
Jamie, can you find those?
Well, I've got them on my... I brought this for you.
All right. Oh, Jimmy
if you
found
want to look at them. But yeah, so there's the 13 bound texts. So among these were things like the Gospel of Thomas, which is considered the second most heretical book in the Nag Hammadi library. There's the Gospel of John, also called the Secret Book of John, also called the Apocryphon of John, which is considered the first most heretical book. There are books from Gnostic women. Thunder Perfect Mind is a book by a Gnostic woman that's in there. The Gospel of James is in there. So these, and I'll be very clear, if you had Wes Huff here, I know you've had before, and I think he's a brilliant scholar, he would say that these are not accepted because they're not accepted by the church because of dating and because of, there's a lot of reasons, but there's a lot of new research showing that that these are worthy of exploring with the same validity that we give to the other texts that we're seeing.
What are they dated to?
They're dated the late 1st, early 2nd century, somewhere right around there. Some of them later. The Book of John, the Secret Book of John, what makes it so exceptional is that he said that it was dictated to him by Jesus of Nazareth after his crucifixion. So it wasn't before, it came after. But the Gospel of Thomas is probably the most controversial. It's 114 sayings that were recorded by Thomas, and the book says Didymus Thomas was the name, and it's almost like it's different from all the other books in that each saying is a teaching unto itself, and what he is saying are, I'm hesitating because we're just covering so much ground here. What Yeshua was his name. What he was teaching was so profound for his time. There were outer teachings and inner teachings. The outer teachings were for the masses, and it's primarily what you see in the Gospels. The inner teachings were for those initiates that could really understand what it was he was saying, and that's what the Gospel of Thomas appears to be. It did come from a later time. I don't think it invalidates that what it is that is being said in there.
What is being said that's so controversial?
Well, there's 114 sayings in there, but the bottom line, and this is one I think that is probably one of the most well-known, where he says, what you bring forth from within you will save you, and what you don't bring forth from within you will destroy you. He's saying there's a power inside of us that has to be expressed. And these texts are all about how we awaken that power. Okay, so the name, I'm going to use a word and then I'll define it. The name that is given to that power traditionally is called divinity, but it has nothing to do with religion. So that association is made because there are schools of divinity that make that, and they're great schools. They do great things. But the contemporary definition of divinity, I love this, the ability to transcend perceived limitations. And that's it. So the ability to transcend, to become more than perceived. Joe, you and I, our listeners, we are living limits that probably aren't even real. We're living within limits that we have been indoctrinated to accept about ourselves. Divinity is our ability to become the best version of ourselves. Expressions of divinity, imagination. I mean, no other form of life can do what we do with imagination. And I want to talk about that in just a moment. It's more than just a picture in your mind. An image in the mind is setting into motion a cascade of chemical effects in the human body that literally change us. We are changed in the presence of the right kind of imagination, and the books tell us how to do that. So imagination, creativity, innovation, empathy, sympathy, love, compassion, healing, forgiveness. These are expressions of human divinity. It's what sets us apart from all other forms of life and makes us such powerful beings. The purpose of evil, and this might be the most important thing that we say today, because it's a nebulous concept, good and evil, until you give it a benchmark. The purpose of evil is to deny human divinity. The purpose of evil is to deny us our greatest expressions, imagination, creativity, the ability to communicate and share our ideas, empathy, sympathy, self-healing, all of those things. So in a very real sense, Joe, anything that denies those things is an expression of evil. So when we find that algorithms are denying us the ability to communicate our ideas, from this perspective, that's an expression of evil. When we find we put something into our bodies that prevents us from healing our own bodies, that is an expression of evil. What the Gnostic texts are saying is that we are in a process that has a beginning and an end. And the purpose of the process is to deny humankind our own humanness. That has been playing out over eons, and now the technology is allowing it to play out to a greater degree because things like AI, things like misused, I'm not anti-AI, it's how it's used. Things like computer chips in the brain, computer-brain interface, all of these things, what they're doing, Joe, is they are denying our humanness. Use it or lose it. If we're using technology in place of our imagination, for example, and the psychology journals are full of articles about this, people that chronically use artists, musicians. My wife is a voting member of the Grammys, and we just had this conversation. You've got musicians who go to ChatGPT and say, hey, write me a song, and now put some music to that song, and now you enter it with the Grammys, and you are competing against a human who has labored 30 or so years to master their voice and an instrument, and you say, is that fair? Well, they're struggling with that right now. But so these are all expressions of anything that denies our humanness. From that perspective, is an expression of evil. Who is doing that? That is what those texts are all about. That's what the texts are talking to us about.
Here's that interesting. This is Gospel of Thomas 1:14. That's how it ends.
Simon Peter said to them, let Mary go away from us, for women are not worthy of life. Jesus said, look, I will draw her in so as to make her male, so that she too may become a living male spirit similar to you. But I say to you, every woman who makes herself male will enter the kingdom of heaven. Okay.
So what they're talking.
What is going on?
Can you go
I'm just
pull up? I'm not sure why you chose that one.
I just was
But
looking around for
can you
interesting
pull up
parts of
number?
That's a very
what was-
interesting part.
Well,
why it might
we
have
can
been
talk
left
about
out.
it because it's in code. He's talking about the marriage, the sacred marriage of masculine and feminine, and it's when you. He said, when you make the two one and the inside like the outside, then you will say the mountain move and the mountain will move. And what he's talking about is honoring the masculine and the feminine, and that's more than just a metaphor. I mean, there's a whole thing that goes with that. Can you bring up saying number 70
I'll go up to 70, sure.
or number 10?
Well, start 70.
So 70 says, Jesus says, if you bring it into being within you, then that which you have will save you. If you do not have it within you, then that which you do not have within you will kill you. Jesus says, I will destroy this house and no one will be able to build it again.
This is the thing. He's in the Christian doctrine, we're led to believe that he was a peacemaker. And what it says very clearly in the Gospel of Thomas, he says, and if you go to the early...
When I was looking it up, the Catholics say that some of this stuff Jesus did say.
Oh, he said it.
Some of it he did not say, and some of it's flat out made up.
They have a problem with the dating, but they also have a problem. It doesn't support the narrative. So there were two councils. There was the Council of Carthage and the Council of Nicaea, and this is where they excluded these documents, but they had been accepted prior to that. Just like Enoch. You've heard people in here talk about the Book of Enoch.
Yes.
And that was accepted before these as well. Yeah. So they're inner teachings not meant for the masses, based upon the concepts that he's sharing. And this is where he's saying there is something inside of us. And the rest of the Gospels, this is what Philip and Thomas are talking about, is that we are imbued with this force, given to no other form of life. It's a light. It is an intelligence. And when we are fully empowered in this intelligence, we are sovereign, critically thinking beings, and we are no longer susceptible to and vulnerable to the agendas and the ideas of others. And there are multiple agendas that are out there. So from this time, and now if when you go to the Sumerian text, they say the same thing. They're saying, when they beheld what it was that they had created, it had more light, more power than those that created it. Then you get into the whole conversation, Genesis, where it says God created man, but that's a translation error because the original texts say Elohim, and Elohim is a plural. Some people will say it's not. There's exceptions to that. But it says Elohim said, let us create man in our image. So even if Elohim is not plural, us implies more than one God. So the point of all of this, and we can drill down into the weeds in all of these, but it appears that there was a collective of intelligence that is responsible for us, okay? That's not science, that's the text. Now you look at the science, the DNA is telling us that 200,000 years ago, there were mutations that cannot happen in nature.
I got off on a giant kick one time reading about giant. And it's like anytime the Smithsonian got involved, it was just shut down.
Yeah. The giant stuff is weird because there's a lot of documentation of people finding giants, like enormous
giant bones, 10,
15-foot tall humans. And then there's also the Nephilim in the Bible that are giants that consumed everything. David and Goliath. There's giants in the Bible. And it makes you think, like, okay, is it a giant like the mountain from the Game of Thrones?
Mm-hmm.
Just
a big
guy. Maybe.
Because people were shorter and relatively back then.
Right, but probably some people weren't if they lived in some places where they had more resources and better genes. Yeah.
Pituitary gland problems, where we have guys 7'11" plus,
Yep, but this seems different. The giants in the Bible and the giants in historical accounts, it seems different. It seems like it's a totally different species of human. And again, if we just found this guy recently that's 1 million years old, and now we know. So forever they were saying that human beings, the timeline used to be Homo sapiens emerged 50,000 years ago, and then they moved it to 150, then they moved it to 250, 300, as they find more information. Now they have to push it to 1 million. And if one day they find a fucking head as big as this table, like, what do they do? What do they do about that? Do they even tell us?
I don't think they would.
I don't think they would.
But why wouldn't they? That's what's weird. Why wouldn't they? Isn't that crazy? But we all agree. We all agree that if they did find a giant, they probably wouldn't tell us.
Yeah.
But not until they did their own, figured it out for themselves or tested on what they want.
No, if they want people to know, but I don't know why they wouldn't want people to know. Like, why am I convinced that they would hide that?
Well, if there is Antichrist on his way, and his goal, he already knows he lost. So his goal at this point is just to destroy as much as possible, get as many souls as possible. And finding stuff like that would prove the Bible more true would turn more people to Christianity or to God, the one true God. Then I could see where if there is like some type of spiritual force that is in somewhat control, then I could see that's the only way I can make sense of it. Is like, why cover up progress? Why not tell people the truth? Because
I think it's ego, and
Yeah.
that might be also related to good and evil in a lot of ways.
loving
because-
yourself and not you're supposed to love God over yourself.
Right, and being the person that has the knowledge and the person that distributes that knowledge and is the gatekeeper of it is a very intoxicating thing for a lot of these academics. And if all of a sudden something comes along that, and this is the speculation about what happened with the Smithsonian, that they took that stuff and just fucking tucked it away.
Mm-hmm.
I would think they would-
femur bones.
They would want to have, secretly do their own test without anybody knowing about it.
I know,
'Cause
but
once you
for
open
to what end? At one point in time,
before everybody else knows, they would already have the answers. I don't know.
but wouldn't there be a time where someone would want to be the guy who discovered it all and get all the credit for it? Like, that's why it doesn't make sense.
To me, if somebody knows God, it is freeing in a lot of way, and you realize that no government is above you, or no man is above you. God is above you, and you serve God. And if you can keep people away from God, you're that much more susceptible to being a slave to something else and worshiping something else.
Whatever evidence or anything that kind of proves that God exists.
Yeah, anything that's going to
keep
prove
that
God's
away.
existence,
Yeah.
I think that's going to be the main thing they shut down.
Right. Like the Shroud of Turin is an excellent example.
Yeah,
that one's
that's
an interesting
wild.
one.
That's a weird one, man. There's a weird one. There's a lot of people that go out of their way to try to disprove it. But when you get into the dating of the cloth, so it used to be they were saying that it was only a few hundred years old, but now they're saying that the way the cloth is made, the cloth is made that's exactly consistent with the time that Jesus was alive, and that more tests need to be done to find out the exact age of it, because the problem is you don't know what piece they studied, and you're not studying the entire thing, and also the image of it is bizarre. Because the image of it, you really only see Jesus when it's a negative of it. Mm-hmm. And they don't know how that image was put on there. It wasn't stained. It wasn't burned on there. They don't know what caused it.
It's like a blast of radiation.
Yes,
Right.
Somebody recreated it with gamma radiation, I think. But the only problem, so it would just be it would need to be an extreme source of light to do that. But the only problem is that would have vaporized, the heat from the light would have vaporized it realistically. So they're wondering, well, if light did do it, how was there no heat?
Right.
So if Christ did raise and pass through it, there's also X-ray images in the shroud apparently.
Well, you see this when you see the shroud in negative. Like, Jamie, pull up an image of it. It's very strange. Like, it shows the lash marks on his body.
Yeah.
It shows his facial features. It shows the holes where his wrist is, where he was crucified. It's very strange stuff.
So
Because, for someone to do that as a hoax and to just not paint it, just to do it in some very weird. Go to that. Yeah, that one right where your cursors are. So over that, make that big.
Recently said it's fake.
They've recently
They
said it's
go
fake?
back and forth
But
on
the
it.
thing
Yeah, it's
is,
been back and
who
forth.
is the person who's they, right?
Yeah.
The Catholic churches who
What's that,
owns
Jamie?
it says they've been debunking it for 650 years.
Well, but 650 years ago, they didn't even have carbon dating. So what were they doing to debunk it back then?
Yeah.
There's a bunch of people that want to debunk it.
It says there's a
So what does
document
it
they
say?
found.
A document?
Well, they were talking. I mean, I don't know.
Where they
Just-
talked about it being bullshit?
Yeah, I've
The
also
thing is,
seen
people,
videos-
I'm sure, called bullshit on it
I've
a
seen
long
videos
time
where
ago.
People have talked about ways that some of that stuff could have been done.
Sure, but how would someone figure out that 500, 1,000, 2,000 years ago, whatever it is?
It could have been 300, 200, 150,
Sure.
60 years ago.
Well, it's 650 years. If they've been debunking it for 650 years, you got to assume it's at least 650 years old.
Well,
So the thing is, it's been dated between 1355 and 1382.
The text was the document
The text, what text?
that we're talking about here, not the shroud.
What is the text about? Medieval document has revealed that the authenticity of the shroud that many believe wrapped and crucified was being called into question perhaps as early as 1355. Okay, well, that means that it existed 1355.
yeah.
Depictions by clergymen. See, it's hard. Deceptions. Oh, excuse me. Deceptions by clergymen. His writings, now considered the oldest written rejection of the relic, predate the previous earliest documented criticism by the Bishop of Troyes, Pierre d'Arcis, in 1389. So either way, we know it's at least 600 plus years old, and we know that the way that it was put on there was not stained, it was not painted. It's very strange. And if you look at it like that, they didn't even know that until they came up with photography, until they could take an image of it and make it a negative. They didn't see the face of Jesus and all the depictions.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this image right here is like, you look at that, the Shroud of Turin, like, yeah, I could say call bullshit, whatever. But then you see the negative, like, go back to those other images. So this is what it looks like when you run it through, when you use modern photography and turn it into a negative. That's really weird that this wasn't, that they didn't know about this in the 1300s.
Yeah.
A new study says it's something else. So they're going to have studies forever that debunk it. And one thing that academics love to do, they love to call everybody retarded.
Yep.
Everybody's an idiot. This is all fake. This is bullshit. But whatever that is, man, when you're just go back to the negative ones, the one that you just had, the one down, right? Yeah, that one, please. That's weird as fuck to me, man. That's weird as fuck that you couldn't see it normally, and you only see it when they make a negative of it. That is so strange. That someone would go out of their way to fake something in that way, where it only exists in a negative.
Well, and they don't even know how it happened.
Right, exactly. They don't know how to. I mean, they're saying they could reproduce it today, but I don't think anybody has. And also, how are you going to reproduce it to such an extent with so much detail that matches the biblical depiction of the crucifixion?
Yeah.
Including the holes in the wrist, the lash marks on his back, the wound in his side. It's all really weird. At the very least, it's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's really interesting stuff.
To me, that seeing that, I really don't even care how old people think it is, or like figure out how they did that first. To me, it's like, if this is
not only that, how'd they do that 600 fucking years ago, or 2,000 years ago, or whatever age it actually is.
I seen one article last year where they found dirt particles that matched, that they trace back to Jerusalem. So it's like I say, they've been debunking it and saying it's authentic and debunking it. It seems like for the last 5 or 10 years now.
Oh, it's very weird stuff.
It's just, where are we at right now with it?
That one church in Ethiopia that's supposed to have the Ark of the Covenant there.
Yeah.
And all the people that guard it, they all get cataracts and they wind up dying of radiation.
I haven't heard that one.
You ever heard of that?
I don't know about that, because the Ark of the Covenant was when God the Father's presence was here on earth, not through Jesus. The Old Testament, the I Am was down here, and that's what he resided in. And you had to do all these things to be in his presence, or you would literally just die, because he's holy. And to me, it's like lightness and dark cannot exist in the same place. So whatever, but God the Father's presence isn't there anymore. So I don't understand why it would still be messing people up.
Well, we don't know what they were writing down, right?
Yeah.
The problem with all ancient religious texts, let's assuming there was real events.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is a lot of these things were told as an oral tradition for 100, 500, 1,000 years before they're ever even written down. And then they write them down. They write them down in Aramaic. They write them down in Hebrew. They write them, and then they have to translate it. And they translate it to Greek and Latin and then eventually English. You're missing a lot along the way. When I read these things, when I read the Bible, or if I read the Book of Enoch or any of these ancient texts, I'm always trying to say, okay, what were they trying to document?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what was the original event? Like, what actually happened? And the problem is, people are really bad at telling the truth. Like, human beings, when they see something fantastic, they always add their own little flavor to it. People add their own little thing to it. If they are of a certain belief, they're going to attach that belief to whatever this thing was. So it's no question that these people held whatever that was in such high regard, and it meant so much to them that they, like the book of Isaiah, where it's verbatim, that they wrote it verbatim for 1,000 years. Back when they started out, they were writing things down on animal skins.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things about the Dead Sea Scrolls that's so fascinating, is they had to do genetic testing So they're writing these things down on these animal skins, and they had to make sure that the skin of this one is the same cow as the skin of this one. So if they do like genetic testing to make sure it's the same cow skin. So, okay, we got all the skin from this cow, and it's in this group of text, so start decoding it.
That's an interesting way of doing it. That's wild.
Yeah.
It's wild.
I would have never thought of that.
And like Wes Huff said, how they used to write things, like they'd leave stuff out back then because it wasn't required back then. They would just write down the basics. I watched that Wes Huff thing, and that was very interesting.
He's fascinating.
He's
Yeah.
brilliant, man.
Yeah.
I've watched a bunch of stuff on him.
Very
I've learned a lot.
brilliant. But it's again, what were they trying to document?
Yeah.
There's clearly something was going on back then. Something happened.
Did you ever read that story? It was somewhere in the Bible. I can't remember where. It's in the Old Testament. Somebody stole the ark. Well, some tribe stole the ark, and like the next day, the next morning, like everybody was dead from stealing the ark, and they pretty much said, "Hey, come get this thing, take it back." Yeah,
Yeah, we don't want it. We're good.
Well, that's what people believe is in this church in Ethiopia.
Yeah.
Because there's these Ethiopian Jews who also, their Bible is the Book of Enoch.
yeah.
Do we have an image of this ark?
No, you can't see it. Nobody can get. I say send in the SEALs. We need to fucking
Yeah, SEAL Team 6
find out what
it.
the fuck is in there, bro. Put these guys in hazmat suits and let's
If
get
the
to
U.S.
the bottom
knows
of
you
this.
got it, it's going to be ours.
Well, yeah, you would imagine.
We're going to take it.
I would
Or
like
they
to
might
see
not know at all.
Well, what would happen with remote viewers if remote viewing is real? Get remote
Oh,
viewers in a
man.
room and
We have talked about
Yes, I mean, it also goes back to the Enlightenment, to the idea that God doesn't exist, and the idea that the human being is the measure of all things. Well, if the human being is the measure of all things, what does that mean? Our reason, and our reason is completely flawed. All of us do things every day which are unreasonable, sinful, wrong, and absurd. Right? And the reasonable person says, wait a second, why did I do that? What do I have to refer to in my confusion and my self-loathing? Well, the Bible was a pretty good bet, for the Hebrew Bible for 6,000 years, right? The Christian Bible for 2,000 is a pretty good bet. Say, wait a second, let's talk about human nature. You really aren't that smart. You really aren't in charge of the world. You really aren't. Although you think you are, you think that because you're human. But God's in charge of the world, and there's a certain way things are. And if you'd like to get out of your wretched self-consciousness and self-delusion, you better get your ass into church.
But don't you think that, when atheists talk about religion and they criticize organized religion and criticize the Bible, they talk about things that are in the Bible that seem preposterous, right? They talk about people rising from the dead and walking on water, particularly the Old Testament, right? Like, to use that as a guidebook for life, you have to kind of ignore some of the stuff that doesn't make sense.
Well,
don't you think?
The Bible's a myth. Okay, the Bible,
Right.
especially the Christian Bible, comes out of the Jewish Bible. It's a retelling of the story in a different way. But the Jewish Bible is a myth, and the myth is the myth of creation and the myth of human experience. So what it does is, chapter by chapter, story by story, it challenges us with disturbing and bizarre images, and it says, why don't you try to understand this? See if you can understand this. What does it really mean to escape from Egypt? Does it mean escaping from your inner Pharaoh? What does it really mean to part the Red Sea? So these stories are told. Any myth is a dramatic retelling of an underlying reality that can't be expressed rationally. Right? So the atheists say everything can be expressed rationally. For example, you know that the earth is burning up. You can tell that because sometimes things get warmer and sometimes things get colder. You can also tell that when things get colder, that's obviously because the earth is burning up, because the sun is melting the glaciers and the glaciers are raising the temperature. You can also tell, of course, that to be fair to everyone, children change sex. You know that, don't you? And you can tell that men can compete as women and women compete as men. This is all human confusion because we trust our senses and we trust our mind, and the mind it doesn't work real good. We're very cunning, but we aren't very smart, human beings. And that's the message of the Bible. And so if you look at Moses, Moses was, the Egyptians tried to kill him all of his life. The Egyptians tried to kill him. He didn't have any trouble with the Egyptians because God was on his side. He had trouble with the Jews because the Jews were always saying, who the hell do you think you are? So all the Old Testament is the story of atheists, really, saying, who the hell do you think you are?
So when you're talking about the Bible, right? And the lessons in the Bible, isn't part of the problem is that people translated it from ancient Hebrew to Latin to Greek and all these other languages, and then eventually to English. Like, a lot's lost along the way, right? And a lot is open to interpretation. Like, a lot of what we're talking about in these myths and stories that people take as factual occurrences, they probably were some sort of there's some sort of a lesson in the myth, some sort of allegory. There's things about these stories that probably have hints of truth. But isn't it hard to kind of decipher it all if you can't speak the mother language?
That's a very good question. So I want to first let me ask you. Okay, I'm going to tell you a story. Okay.
Okay.
These two octopuses walk into a laundromat.
Okay.
See, that's what a myth is. I said two octopuses walk into a laundromat, and you didn't say, wait a second, octopuses can't walk and they wouldn't be in a laundromat.
Well, I thought about it, but I'm being polite.
So what you said is, yeah, tell me more. Okay.
I'm hoping there's a good joke.
Okay, well, I'll get to that. But it's the same thing with the Bible is really two octopuses walk into a laundromat. So I'm going to tell you a story. I want you to suspend your disbelief because there's something in the story you might get a kick out of. Mm-hmm. There might be some wisdom in it. There might, yes and might no. But if you listen as you would to a story, which the Bible is, it's a myth, rather than to a factual retelling, you might get a kick out of it. Now, as far as a translation goes, I can read the Bible in Hebrew. I started learning when I was 40. It's easy language. And there are a lot of mistranslations. But the main point is not the mistranslations, because there are some pretty good English translations too. But the main point is saying that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense.
So what do you think the Bible is? Do you think the Bible is a bunch of very wise people got together and they formed these stories to sort of illustrate the folly of mankind and how one needs to have like a moral compass and guiding principles that are set in stone, and that you have these rules to live your life in a moral and just way, and that'll make for a better society? Like, what do you think the Bible actually is?
Well, a friend of mine, a rabbi, was a Reform rabbi, was applying to get into an Orthodox yeshiva, an Orthodox college, and he's a Reform rabbi. So the guy says, you have very good credentials and you're very well learned. Do you think the Bible is literally the work of God? The rabbi says, no. So the guy says, well, is it possible? Rabbi says, yes. Guy says, okay, you're in. Right? So Dennis Prager, who I'm crazy about, said the other day, he said, I don't believe in the Torah, the Jewish Bible, because of God. He said, I believe in God because of the Torah. So if you read the Torah, the Jewish Bible, and the Christian Bible is just an extension of that, you say, my God, this is incredible wisdom. This goes back to the beginning of time. People who've tried to figure out everything. And
right.
they didn't have the language that we have, but they had the language that they had. And this was thousands of years of experience progressed and compressed into a myth. So we know that this is true because liberals have always been in love with the myths, especially Jews, with the myths of other cultures, right? We say how beautiful it is that this culture has that myth, that the Haida Indians say the world was formed by a large beaver, and when the beaver slapped his tail like that, it made the oceans, and when the blah, blah, blah. It's a gorgeous myth. Mm-hmm. Nobody says of that myth, wait a second, you can't have a beaver that big. Right?
That's what I would say.
Yeah, okay.
I would step in and go, hey, man.